Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heart-Based Business Show. I'm your host, Dr. Shirlene Reeves, and I want to have a talk with you today about heart-based relationships because so many people have talked to me about what they are. They don't really know what that means. So I thought I'd share that with you. And we're going to talk about expectations today and what that does to kill your relationships. Have you ever noticed that when you have expectations, what happens? Oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. And we never want to have expectations because we're always disappointed. Okay, so I'll be right back. Just hang in there. And welcome back. I'm so glad you're here with me today because this is a really important topic. And as I said, I want to talk to you about heart-based relationships. And what I love about the Authors and Speakers Visibility Playground is that almost everyone there is heart-based. And I've talked to the majority of the people there, which is really exciting. So do me a favor, would you click like and subscribe? I'd really appreciate it. It helps us build this channel. And if you would, ask your friends to join too, so they can learn these wonderful things about their business and how to ramp it up and move forward. That's what's really important. We work so hard on our businesses, and the last thing we want to do is destroy it. And we can do that so easily if our relationships aren't built in a heart-based way. So let's talk about heart-based relationships. What does that mean? Like I said, so many people have asked me that. So there's three things that everybody wants. One is to be seen. The other is to be heard. And the third is to be respected. And so many people are raised in a way that they are able to be seen, but not heard. And it doesn't do any good to be seen if you aren't heard because you don't have any input. You don't have any opinion. You feel sort of useless. Like, why am I here in the first place if nobody wants to hear what I have to say? And if nobody wants to hear what I have to say, then I feel like I'm not respected. Have you ever felt that way? Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you about that, because so many people have been just crushed because they aren't able to offer their opinion, particularly at home. It's kind of like with your parents, my way or the highway, right? You'll do what I say while you're under my roof. Well, that does not help the growth of a human being. That really inhibits them. And it makes them fearful to speak out. It makes them fearful to feel as though their opinion is important. So now that you know what heart-based relationships are, let's talk about expectations. And I learned this from my grandpa Lou. If you've listened to some of my other videos, you know how close my grandpa Lou and I were. And when I was a child, he showered me with loving weekend life lessons. And he really listened to me. I was not only seen with him, I was heard. I was asked my opinion, and I was respected because he cared enough to ask. And he taught me some really important things. One was to question authority. Another was to think for myself and act on the ethereal guidance I received. And most of all, to think with my heart. Most of us walk around thinking with our mind, and our mind, for the most part, is completely out of control. Have you ever noticed that one day it'll say to you, you really need to do this, because if you don't do this, then you're going to be a failure. And then 3 days later, it'll say to you, you know, you've been working really hard. You don't need to do that. you're not going to fail if you let it go another day. Well, that is a mind out of control, because you're really not receiving the information that you need in order to be successful in your business or in your relationships. So when you think with your head, we get angry very easily. We don't like what others have to say. We're not patient and understanding and compassionate. But if we drop it down just 18 inches into our heart, then we can come from a place of understanding and love. And this has always been the philosophy of my life, is to let others know that I care about them. I want to hear what they say. I want their opinion, because their opinion is important to me. It's not only about them being seen. And so when I do a webinar or a course or something like that, right away, I'm going to ask the people in my course to start speaking about who they are, what their challenges are, and what they intend to get out of whatever it is they're learning from me. That way, they have a say in their learning experience. But let me go back to my time with my grandpa. We used to sneak quietly into the kitchen because my grandmother was sleeping, and we pretend like she didn't know, but of course she knew. And it was like 5 a.m. in the morning on Sunday, and we would make breakfast together. We worked as a team, and he taught me how to work as a team in a loving way. That's what it was all about, was just teaching me by experience. So we'd go in the kitchen and we would make peanut butter toast, and we'd wrap it all in foil so it would stay warm. And then Grandpa would make the hot chocolate. And I should tell you, I was between 5 and 7 then. It went on for many years, because I never learned it the first time. I had to hear it over and over again. Like other people, we never hear it the first time. And we never put it into practice the first time we hear it either. So we need to hear it over and over again. So here we have these little aluminum foil sandwiches, peanut butter sandwiches, and I love sourdough, and we'd always toast them and slather the peanut butter on and then wrap them up. And the hot chocolate would go in a Coke bottle, and then we put a stopper on it and roll that up in newspaper so that it would stay hot. And in those days, we had these little cereal boxes, and you'd cut it down the center and on the bottom, and then you could pour milk in them. You didn't even have to use a dish. So I'd get to choose my cereal box based on a plethora of cereal boxes that were there. And then we'd put some milk in a jar and load it all into a paper bag and head out toward the park. Because what I loved to do was sit in the announcer's box of the softball field, and we would talk quietly about things. And it was just my special time with my grandpa. It was so special. And he told me that, we could live a selfish life if we were guided by a powerful spirit who keeps us on a path of accomplishing great tasks. But when we have expectations out of others, then frequently we're going to fall down on our accomplishments because, well, let me tell you from the doctor's side, all of us are like 2-year-olds. You may have heard this from other people. They're like 2-year-old toddlers because they haven't grown up. They've got that stuff stuck in them from the time they were a little tiny child. And then they have these feelers on their shoulders who are watching out to make sure that nobody says anything or does anything that affects this pain that was instilled in us when we were 2 years old. And so what we end up with is not only that 2-year-old feeling, but also all the layers that we have experienced throughout our life that have added to that negative self-talk that we do, that negative attitude. And when we have expectations, it gets even worse, wouldn't you say? When you have an expectation of someone and they don't live up to that expectation, what happens? Wah! The 2-year-old gets all upset, starts yelling, and then the two of them start fighting. And this will go on and on and on for years. But what happens is then they break up, right? And they say to themselves, oh, I'm so glad that's over with. And then the 2-year-old goes toddling off looking for another 2-year-old with the same expectations that weren't met the last time. That's the problem, is expectations. And when Grandpa was teaching me about this, I had a problem with some girls at school. And I wanted to play with them, but they totally ignored me. They didn't want to let me be a part of whatever it was that they were doing. And in fact, they were really mean about it, and it hurt my feelings terribly. So on this morning, we talked about these girls. And Grandpa said to me, what expectations do you have about these girls? And I said, well, they play tetherball. I'd love to play tetherball with them. And, you know, they play out in the field. They'll do things, or they'll jump rope or something. And I want to be a part of that. And I feel like I'm an outcast. And he said, okay, I've got a couple of things for you to think about. First of all, you may not be a good fit for the relationships that they have. And your expectation is that they are going to be friends with you and that you're going to have this wonderful time with them. But believe me, even if you were a part of their group, you probably wouldn't have a wonderful time, because you would be expecting that they would see you, hear you, and respect you. And based on the girls, what do you think about that? Do you think that they would be able to do those things? Everybody has those 3 simple needs, but they're very difficult to achieve with people. And even if you said, okay, I'm okay with that, I can show them that I see them, I will listen to them, and I will respect them. But then if you have an expectation that they're going to live up to something specific that you want in your life, that isn't going to work. Expectations are the biggest problem that we have in relationships. A lot of people are people pleasers, Grandpa said. And they're out just trying to please everybody. And they have the expectation that if they do for others, the others will do for them. Have you ever had that expectation? Well, that's totally unrealistic, because it's not going to happen. And in the treatments that I do with my clients, that's one of their biggest complaints. They say, I do so much for other people, but then they don't do anything for me. And that is the expectation that breaks down the relationships. So when Grandpa was talking to me about this and about these girls, he said, you need to learn to listen through the words that others share. That's very unique, isn't it? Listen to the words that others share. And he pointed to a big tree, and he said, if you look at the leaves in the tree, you miss so much because your eyes are only focused on the leaves. But if you look through the tree, and then you see the inside of what's really going on. And he compared this to listening through the words a person expresses. If you pay attention to their actions and look into their eyes and really see who a person is, that's what it means to be seen. And then you listen to their words and you look through them. You can see the fear a person may be feeling, the insecurity that a person may be feeling. And he said, now you're really good in school, aren't you? And I told him, yes, I'm really good in school. I get good grades. And he said, do these girls get good grades? And I said, no, they're kind of a cut up in school. It's all about them. They're disruptive with the teacher and they don't always get their work done. And the teacher talks to them about that in front of the class. And he said, did you ever think that maybe they are jealous of who you are because they can't live up to who you've become? I sat very quietly because that was an interesting comment. You see, we don't really know what's going on in another person's mind. It's not possible to know. And they react based on that 2-year-old. So yes, a 2-year-old would get jealous if somebody else was doing better than they are. Would you agree? Makes perfect sense. And Grandpa said, just understand that they may not feel like they can live up to who you are. And as a result, they don't want you to be there in their group to be competitive. Their expectation is that you will always be competitive, that you won't be friendly, and that you are going to make them feel less than who they feel they are already. And I said to him, what about the fact that I feel like I don't belong? I'm alone. I feel like an outcast. And he said, you are so lucky. And I thought, wow, that's really weird. He said, woohoo, if you feel like an outcast, that's like a black sheep or somebody who's been cast out of the family. And guess what? If you're an outcast, then you have a tremendous amount of freedom. You don't have to listen to what anybody has to say. You don't have to deal with the judgments. You don't have to deal with the nitpicky little comments that really drive you nuts. I know what you're talking about when it comes to driving people nuts with their little comments, because it's all about judgment. And judgment, too, is based on expectation. You couldn't judge somebody if you didn't expect something from them, or they expect them to be somebody different than what you expect them to be, or you don't behave like they want you to behave. They say you're not normal. But the question is, what's normal? And what is the expectation that we're supposed to live up to in order to be normal? Well, if you're an outcast, you don't have to live up to any expectation. You have complete freedom. And if you're an outcast from the family, you don't have any holidays you have to attend. You don't have to go to birthdays. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do because you are an outcast. They're not watching you. You have the freedom to do whatever you like. So when you think about expectations and freedom, what does that mean to you? Grandpa said that expectations are the biggest downfall in any relationship. And even if you are making every effort to have a heart-based relationship, once you put expectations into the mix, then suddenly it all falls apart. And I asked him, so what do I do then? And he said, you can either not have any expectations at all, or keep your expectations very low. Well, that was a pretty good idea of what I should do with these girls in particular. But then when you look at your business, when you do a course, your expectation may be, I'm going to have 100 people in this course. And then when only 20 people show up, you're disappointed. An expectation causes a tremendous amount of disappointment. And you don't want to deal with disappointment. So what if you just said, I'm so grateful that these 20 people showed up. I could have had no one. You see, it's reframing how you think about things. That's all it is. And when you have expectations, the toddler doesn't get what they want, and they start whining and crying and moaning and making everybody else around them miserable, when the reality is that if they'd had no expectation, if they just let people be who they are without judgment, then everyone would be so much happier. And I lived in a home that was full of judgment. Everything was judged all the time. My hair, my clothes, everything that I did was judged all the time. And because I didn't have an opinion, I had no ability to respond. So here's the deal. If you are judging others, even once in a day, and I'm sure you do it many more times than that, look at the expectation behind that judgment. What do you expect? I saw a couple the other day, and they were standing not far from me, so I could hear everything that they were saying. And they were commenting on these people's clothing. They didn't dress like they did. And so there was the judgment. What was the expectation? The expectation was that they should dress the way they dressed. But that's not how life is. Everybody's different in our world, and everybody has a right to be different. So when you start judging, think about those expectations that you're putting on other people. And that's what Grandpa told me to do. So I don't judge anymore, because I realize it's my expectation that I'm judging against. And what right do I have to have that expectation? That morning, that Sunday morning with Grandpa Lou was very special, because it was something that I really remembered. He didn't have to tell me that more than once, because I had an example to work with. I went back to school and I just let the girls be. And do you know that after about 3 weeks, they started coming to me because I wasn't trying to chase them any longer? I changed my expectation for them. I expected nothing for them. And as a result, they came to me. And we had a nice talk about how we could be friends, what we could do together, how we could play together. And we even did some homework together. So you see, if you can avoid the expectations and the judgment, then you can turn people's attitudes and behaviors around simply by not being judgmental yourself. So when you decide to talk about somebody else and what they're doing, think about who you are as far as an expectation, what your thoughts are, and work on you. Don't worry about them. It's you that needs to be worked on. And that's the point that Grandpa made. It's me and my expectations that make all the difference in our relationships. So everybody, I hope you understood what I was sharing with you. I hope it made sense. And I love sharing these stories that my grandpa taught me, because he was such a special man in my life. He was the man in my life. I don't know if you've had a grandpa like that. I'd love to hear about what your grandpa taught you, or if you were lucky enough to have a grandpa at all that loved you as much as mine loved me. So I want to talk to you briefly about the Authors and Speakers Visibility Playground. I think that you would really love joining it and being a part of our group. It's all a heart-based group, and we don't talk about judging each other. We lift the whole community at one time. Nobody has to work alone. And as entrepreneurs, that's really important, don't you think? Because we're so alone. And every week we have a free mastermind group, and it's also a referral group. So we all refer together and to each other and work together. And I think that you would really, really love it if you're looking for a heart-based community. That's what's so important. And also, if you like the show, please like us, click the bell, let us know that you love us, because We work so hard to be here for you and bring you really good content. And I'd love it if you would make some comments and let me know your thoughts, or let me know what you would like me to talk about on a show, and I'd be happy to do that for you. And the last thought I have for you is to tell you about the Authors and Speakers Visibility Playground. We're going to have the Authors 5-Day Challenge, and it's how to turn your $10 nonfiction book into $1,000 so that you can make $100,000 next year. Wouldn't you love to do that? And we have so many books just sitting around. We've worked hard to write them and publish them and put them out there, and then nothing happens, and we don't end up selling anything. We put it on Amazon and we do our international bestseller thing, right? Everybody does that. It's so easy to do now. But after that, nothing sells. So what I wanted to show you is what I do personally, so that you can create a program around the messaging in your book and teach it, and then you can make $100,000 a year too. So thanks so much for joining me today. I always appreciate it. Ted, thanks for showing up today. And Julia, I'm glad you're here with me too. Yes, I agree with you. I like it too when people don't have expectations about me. And let's see, we've got Tom down here, and he's saying, yeah, he knows about that family outcast thing. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you next week on the Heart-Based Business Show once again.